information. That's what grabs people too. She always protested that she was not one of these spiritual athletes. She knew about John of the Cross and Teresa of Avila, these great figures. She admired them. And she would say, but I'm not like that. I'm not a spiritual athlete. I'm not one of these great trees that grow up to God. I'm just a little flower. And that's where the nickname comes from. I'm a little flower on the floor of the forest. No one's going to notice me. But the sun can shine equally on all of them. The sun hits the high trees and the sun comes down to the forest floor. And so it's a great metaphor for the universality of grace. That we're all susceptible to the influence of grace. As the sun shines on the good and the bad alike, it shines on the great and the small alike. So that was a great bit of spiritual intuition she had, I think, that appeals to people.
What about that analogy of, like, you said she lifted her hands up to God?
Oh yeah, that's a splendid one, I think. It's beautiful. And there's kind of a wry smile behind it, because she again acknowledges the spiritual athletes. You know, these serious people, they're climbing their way up to God. And she admired them. But she also, with that little wry smile, would say, well, I'm just this little child. I can't climb a mountain, but I can raise my arms up like this, and of course, he's going to want to pick me up. And then she sort of winks at the spiritual athletes and says, and actually, I get higher than you, because he lifts me right up. It's that kind of perception that I think people find very moving and very attractive.
Okay. Somebody will get those lights. Did you learn anything about these two saints? Yeah. This is amazing stuff. So he started out his video this morning with a simple question: who is a saint? And then he defines for us. Bishop describes a saint in a kind of way that I think still tends to make many of us uncomfortable, or at the very least confused. He describes a saint as a friend of God, a person of heroic virtue, and someone who is in heaven. And he sums it all up: a saint is someone who has allowed Christ to live his life in him. St. Paul put it this way. This is the verse that he quoted: I have been crucified with Christ. It's no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. And the life that I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. And I'm really not sure this morning how many Christians know how to process what he's saying there. He used the example of Peter, a fisherman by trade, describing the moment that Jesus met Peter for the first time. And here's the scripture: while the people pressed upon him to hear the word of God, he was standing by the lake of Gennesaret. And he saw two boats by the lake, but the fishermen had gone out of them and were washing their nets. Getting into one of the boats, which was Simon's, he asked him to put out a little from the land. And he sat down, Jesus did, and taught the people from the boat. And when he had ceased speaking, he said to Simon Peter, put out in the deep and let down your nets for a catch. And Simon answered, Master, we toiled all night and took nothing. But at your word, at your word I will let down the nets. And when they had done this, they enclosed a great shoal of fish, and their nets were breaking. They beckoned to their partners in the other boat to come and help them. And they came and filled both boats, and they began to sink. But when Simon Peter saw it, he fell down at Jesus' knees, saying, Depart from me, for I am a sinful man, O Lord. That's a powerful scene. And it's the first time Jesus and Peter met face to face. I love the way Bishop describes the beginning of the making of a saint. It's an invasion of grace. Jesus sees two boats, and he just gets in Peter's boat and asks him to put out a ways from the shore so he can teach the people. But then grace gets a little bolder. Jesus tells Peter, put out into the deep and let down your nets. And here's the first hint of Peter resisting this invasion of grace. Big hint right here. If you are experiencing an invasion of grace, go with it, okay? Just do it. Like Nike, just do it. Because you do not want to resist. And Peter's response finally was, but at your word, I will let down the nets. Do not be surprised if Jesus wants to get in your boat one of these fine days and give you a boatload of grace. That's the beginning of saints. And every one of us in this room can tell different parts of our lives where God got in our boat. We didn't ask him to, but he just got in. And he gave us an invasion of grace. The important part when that happens is to cooperate with that grace. Wow. I'm sure Peter was a good fisherman, but guess what? When Jesus got on his boat, he immediately became a better fisherman. And that's what happens. When Jesus gets in your boat, you're going to be better at whatever God has called you to do. Your nets will be full to overflowing. You're going to need help to bring in the catch. If we listen to, go out to the deep with me and let down your nets. That's the scary part. That's the scary part. Grace enhances everything it touches. Even your livelihood and all that's vital to you. Any kind of resistance will eventually bring you to your knees. And that's absolutely true. Saints are the ones that allow Jesus to get into their boat and take over their lives. And then Bishop Barron opens up the lives of 4 saints, all women from very different backgrounds, and today we looked at 2 of them. The first is Catherine Drexel. I say of Pittsburgh because that's when she became religious, where she entered into an order. Once again, Bishop takes us on location to the Sisters of the Blessed Sacrament at Ben Salem, Pennsylvania. Founded by Catherine Drexel. And her story is very inspirational. I didn't know a whole lot about her until I watched this video. Her father and stepmother, devout Catholics. Mr. Drexel was a very rich, well-to-do banker, and every day he came home from the bank and spent time in their family chapel that he had built in their home. 3 days a week they opened their home to the poor. How many of us have done that? Think about what's going on inside this little girl's heart in opening up to God. Even though they were very, very wealthy, the Drexels believed God had made them wealthy in order to help those in real need. Father James O'Connor had a tremendous impact on young Catherine, encouraging her at the age of 14 to develop a path of spiritual growth and holiness that she might follow, and that's exactly what she did. What were you doing at 14 years old? I was a mess. Pimples everywhere. She was well educated, and at age 20, she was introduced to high society in Philadelphia that left her unimpressed and rather bored. And just a few months after that, she lost both her father and stepmother. They died within months of each other. And she inherited a very large sum of money in her early 20s. Each of the sisters, all 3 of them, received $4 million each, which in today's value, $400 million. Not knowing what to do with all that money and the rest of her young life, she was visited by a bishop and a priest who'd founded missionary work among the Native Americans out west. They did such an impressive job of describing their vision, she traveled west with them to see the work for herself. And she ended up giving a very large portion of her inheritance to the mission. But she still struggled. She didn't know what her future was, and like many wealthy Americans at that time, she tried to find solace and direction by visiting many of the European resorts and spas and baths at that time. That makes sense to me. If you're confused, take a bath. She did, however, at the end of that journey, have another life-changing encounter, being granted an audience with Pope Leo XIII. She knelt before the Pope and spoke of her passion for Native Americans and her desire to see them evangelized, catechized, and truly loved by the church. She pleaded with the Holy Father to find an order of priests or nuns that could be sent to these precious souls. Pope Leo listened and looked at her with intense compassion and said to her, "You are the one to do that work." And those words by the Vicar of Christ cut her to the heart. Outside the Vatican that day, she sobbed and sobbed and sobbed. I could just see her. She began to think deeply about this challenge of the Pope, and she began to think about becoming a nun. Her spiritual director back in Pennsylvania was doubtful that a wealthy, protected young aristocrat could even make the difficult transition to religious life and begin a work like this and see it through to its completion. But eventually he relented, and soon after she entered into religious life and became a nun. Sorry about that. She probably was numbed for a while. 2 years later, 1891, she became the foundress of the Sisters of the Blessed Sacrament for Indians and colored people. I love this statue with a black toddler in her arms and looking into the eyes of a young Indian girl. From the beginning of the order, she began to attract many other sisters that were eager to join the mission and ready to dedicate their lives to the new order. They trained for 3 years, and then they began their work with the Pueblo Indians of New Mexico, and you'll see her here standing with them, and some priests as well. Soon after, they built a school along the James River in West Virginia for African American children. And then she founded Xavier University in New Orleans for young blacks to receive quality college education. That was unheard of in that time, in the late 1800s, and is still a great university to this day. Drexel, Catherine Drexel, now a simple nun, gave and gave and gave until she couldn't give anymore. For many years, she traveled constantly, overseeing the many works the new order had begun, but travel was very difficult in those days, stressing her body, causing her to curtail a constant travel. She actually had a heart attack and had to slow way down. That did not stop her. For the last 20 years of her life, she prayed constantly from the mother house for the success of the work of the order she had founded. She died in 1955, living out her life of poverty and devotion to the work that God had called her to. Bishop makes this point, that we should all strive to become a saint. That's the greatest goal of this life. Only saints are in heaven. So, and I love the way he always says this, by God, everyone, every one of us should make it our life's goal to become a saint. When's the last time somebody asked you, what do you want to do with your life? And you said, I'd like to be a saint. We don't think in those terms. But Bishop is saying, that's what we ought to do. And then here comes Therese of Lisieux. I can't say it very well. The video takes us, look at the inside of that basilica. in Lisieux, France. Beautiful. Built in veneration of this saint called the Little Flower. She was a cloistered nun who died at the age of 24, and at her death, she was known only to her family and the sisters in her order. Now who knows about her? The whole world. How did that happen? What was that invasion of grace? Within a few years of her death, she had a worldwide following, and soon after she was declared a saint and eventually a doctor of grace in the church. I found this astounding. When the reliquary containing her bones was brought to the United States in the 1990s, millions responded. Wow. When they took her to Ireland, the whole country came to see her bones. It all started with an autobiography called The Story of a Soul. At first, Bishop was not impressed with the writing, but after several years he noticed all these intellectuals who were drawn to Therese, Catholic thinkers that were admired by the church and the bishop. Thomas Merton, Dorothy Stein, John Paul II, many others were admirers of the Little Flower. And that prompted him, after his favorite French professor in Bishop's doctorate program, and he knew he needed to take a second look. Look at that face. How can you not love that face? Looks a lot like Jerry.
Jerry.
You're cute, Jerry. You just are. You're welcome. Therese was born into a very devout Catholic family, middle class by all accounts, very devoted to her father. He was the little king and she was the little princess. Her childhood was not easy. They picked on her at school. She lost her mother at age 4. And then her older sister, who would become her substitute mother, left to enter the local convent. And Therese took a turn for the worst. And she suffered for years from serious physical and psychological ailments. A statue of our Blessed Mother turned all of that around for her in one day. Yeah, I see it now. With one invasion of grace. Bishop takes us right. I love the way he goes around the world and shows you all this stuff. How many know a lot of us may not make it to Therese's bedroom? But he takes us there. I love this series. Bishop takes us right into her bedroom and the very statue of our Blessed Mother, describing how that day she became fixed on the smile of our mother, and a rush of healing set everything right in her body and her mind. She was miraculously healed. Bishop makes the statement right at this point. In the video, that would make a lot of Protestants sit up and take notice. I mentioned that while we were listening to it. Therese saw at that moment in time as an invasion of grace. And Bishop states it this way: we Catholics know we need to cooperate with that grace. But the reality is, everything in our lives starts with grace, and it comes to a completion by that same grace. It starts with grace, and it ends with grace. And in between, we better be cooperating with that grace. Right? Amen. That's so important. At the age of 15, she had a burning desire to enter into the Carmelite order of nuns, but she was resisted by a lot of priests and bishops, being told she was too young. She's 15 years old. Didn't stop her. She convinced her father, and then she joined some pilgrims, and Leo XIII is going to get another difficult one to kneel at his feet here. We're hearing a lot about Leo from these two saints. She had been told to say not a word to the Pope as she traveled with these pilgrims to Rome, but she couldn't hold it in. Her passion to become a Carmelite inside of her came gushing out. And the Pope smiled, and he only told her, "You will enter if God wills it." And she had to be carried out, begging her case by 2 papal guards. 1 month later, the bishop of the diocese gave in, and she entered the Carmelite convent in Lisieux at the age of 15. She lived the last 9 years of her life as a simple Carmelite nun, cultivating a path that she would call the little way, the kind of way that any simple believer could follow. How many have read about the little way? Yeah, many of you. Jackie has read it as well, and it moved her very strongly. The kind of way that any simple believer could follow. It was based on sacred scripture. And here's the scripture in Matthew 3:18, 3 and 4. And said, "Truly I say to you, unless you turn and become like children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven." Powerful statement. Whoever humbles himself like this child, and Jesus had a child on his knee when he's saying this, he is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And we all know how children are. They're completely dependent. They're full of hope, always ready to receive gifts. In her story of the soul, I love this picture of her. Now this is a little cuter than you, Jerry.
I need to cut my curls off.
Yeah, I understand. You didn't have these curls, did you?
Yeah.
In the story of her soul, her autobiography, Therese described the importance of becoming a little child who sleeps without fear in the Father's arms. Wow. The little way was also about choosing to do simple and little things, but do them with great love. Great love. Small acts of kindness. Very simple sacrifices. But they all add up to a very big difference, not only in your life, but the life of everyone around you. She described her struggle to apply the little way, taking care of a cranky older... How many know some nuns can get kind of cranky when they get old? How many teachers did you have? I've heard about it. Some even like to show me your knuckles got popped every once in a while. That's how she began to learn the little way, as she loved this cranky older nun. Striving to keep things very simple, very childlike, and totally immersed in love, responding to what love demands. Toward the end of her life, she had this great, I love the way he describes this. I didn't realize this about her life. Toward the end of her life, she had a great desire to fulfill all the great callings of the church. She wanted to be an evangelist, a priest, a martyr, a missionary, and even a doctor of the church. And then she thought, how am I going to do that in my little convent in Lisieux, France, as a Carmelite? How am I going to do that? She begged God. She begged Jesus to know, how can I fulfill this incredible desire inside of me? And that's when she discovered 1 Corinthians chapter 13. If I speak in tongues of men and angels and have not love, I am a noisy gong and a clanging cymbal. Can you imagine listening to these words in her little spirit? If I have prophetic power and understand all the mysteries and all the knowledge, and if I have all the faith so as to remove mountains, but I have not love, I'm nothing. And if I give away all I have and deliver my body to be burned, but I have not love, I gain nothing. Love is patient and kind. Love's not jealous or boastful. It's not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It's not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice in wrong, but rejoices in right. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. So faith, hope, love abide, these three, but the greatest of these is love. And in these moments of revelation, she suddenly knew what empowered the evangelist, priest, martyr, and doctor of the church. It was love. The love of Christ. And Therese determined to be that powerful love in the heart of the church where she was, in her little way. And that truly is a little way. Toward the very end of her life, this is so interesting to me because it also happened to a saint we're going to study next week, Teresa of Calcutta. Toward the very end of her life, she struggled with doubts that God even existed, as well as heaven. And that went on for months and months, being enveloped in what she called a terrible darkness. But she had an understanding of why God allowed that to happen. She believed that God brought that darkness upon her so she could experience in her own soul what life is like for an unbeliever that had no faith, no place for God in their lives, like many of her generation. She died of tuberculosis September 30th, 1897. In a few years after her death, through the publication of The Story of a Soul, a vast following of believers in the little way began to grow and grow and grow. She claimed over and over that she was not one of the giant trees in the forest of the church. She was nothing more than a little flower on the forest floor. And that's what they began to call her as the years went by. This is the little flower. Great power can indeed come from small packages. And we will see this again as we look at the life of Mother Teresa of Calcutta and the life of Edith Stein as well. Isn't that incredible? No one knew her. No one except her family and those nuns that she lived with for 9 years. 15 years old, died at 24. And look at the basilica that's, and the millions that go to see her. Yes.
I just wanted to mention there's a beautiful shrine in Oklahoma, St. Therese. It's really beautiful. I can't quite remember exactly where it is, but it's there.
How many know if you let Jesus get in your boat, all kinds of things can happen? You could even make Jerry cuter than he is today.
That's hard to believe.
It is. Very hard to believe. I think yes, Bill.
Want to share an update. So many of you have told us you're praying for Chris. He arrived in Guatemala for Spanish studies with Father Chad Arnold. He's our Wichita vocations director. They got to visit the town where Blessed Stanley Rother from Oklahoma was killed. Last Sunday,
yeah, chapel where he was assassinated.
Wow. Wow.
And then some of the locals gave all of the seminarians skulls, and they were able to go to his grave and
That's wonderful.
touch that.
Can you imagine the presence of God right there?
Yeah. But he thanks you all for your prayers.
Oh, that's awesome. I think we have a commercial in the back.
You do?
Yeah, I knew we did.
It was good. I was able to be here for the exact moment that I needed to be here to listen to that.
Yeah, there you go.
Hey, Fiesta's coming up. Hard to believe. Don't all come running, but do all come running and buy some tickets. So they're $3 each right now. They went up $1 because we don't know if we're going to have a beer tent or not. So we're trying to supplement it in other ways. But if you buy 10 tickets, they're $25. So it's a savings of $5 there. But
You have a new priest?
yes. Give
And
me a
what's his
second. I
name?
just found out today. Charlie Seward. He's out of Great Bend.
And Father
Garden
Mike?
City. So Garden City. Charles Seward did an 8-year stint in Garden City through Dodge City Diocese, but through Wichita Diocese. So he's coming to be our.
And Father Mike has to put up with all of us at least another year. Praise God.
I was wondering after renovation.
Yeah. Yes.
I just wanted to mention that I went to the Catholic Culture Conference
Yes.
over the weekend, and one of the things that impressed me that I think everyone will be glad to hear is that, you know, we have a different kind of governor now who is pushing very many ideologies that go against our faith. And all 4 of our Kansas bishops went with Chuck Weber, the head of the Kansas Catholic Conference, to meet with Governor Kelly. And they were there to voice their concerns about furthering abortion through expansion of Medicaid. And Archbishop Naumann spoke very courageously to her about the concerns, and they were met with rather, not outright hostility, but, with hostility. But anyway, I was really impressed.
How many know Roe versus Wade is going to get looked at again? Look at all those different laws that have been passed, the heartbeat law that are passing state by state by state. It will get looked at again. Keep praying, keep praying, keep praying.
There's going to be a bill introduced. Our Supreme Court recently made abortion through the full term part of the Kansas Constitution. Yeah. Now there's going to be a bill coming up that will state that abortion is not part of the Kansas Constitution.
Very good.
So be supportive, pay attention, and let's see, there's one more thing. Everybody
real quickly, because we got to pray and
okay,
go here.
Everybody was really encouraged to run for office.
Okay, if you're not doing anything else, run for office. You can walk for office if you'd like. Let's pray. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. You are God, we praise you. You are the Lord, we acclaim you. You are the eternal Father. All creation worships you. To you all angels, all the powers of heaven, cherubim and seraphim, sing endless praise. Holy, holy, holy Lord, God of power and might. Heaven and earth are full of your glory. The glorious company of apostles praise you. The noble fellowship of prophets praise you. The white-robed army of martyrs praise you. Throughout the world, the Holy Church acclaims you. Father of majesty unbounded, your true and only Son, worthy of all worship. and the Holy Spirit, advocate and guide. You, Christ, are the King of glory, the eternal Son of the Father. When you became man to set us free, you did not spurn the bondage of womb. You overcame the sting of death and opened the kingdom of heaven to all believers. You are seated at God's right hand in glory. We believe that you will come and be our judge. Come then, Lord, and help your people, bought with the price of your own blood, and bring us with your saints to glory everlasting. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. I'm going to LA, but I'll see you next Sunday. Love you guys.
My favorite Father's Day yet.
What's that?
My favorite Father's Day.
And yes.
Father Father.
Where's he from?
Yeah, we were just. I was thinking maybe I'm the one that did flower babies.
Yeah. Oh, cool.
Where he went, studied, he didn't have German speaking Latin. He never could master Latin. Then he finally decided to write maybe Greek for this. You wouldn't be able to say that. He was adored.
As a doorman.
He had hundreds and hundreds of miracles attested to him. He finally had to make a unique write them down. And he was writing them down.
As the doorman. I love it.
Because he couldn't see.
But he wasn't.
Morning, Chris.
How are you?
Everything was going along. It was the last day. I used to and there was a bunch of guys sitting there watching them like people were fantastic. Just lowered my eyes and prayer ended. I'm your proctor today. My name's Leslie.
How cool is that?
I knew then.
I'm glad you made it today.
Where you go?
You use your outside voice a lot. Use your outside voice.
Sometimes we can hear it.
There you go.
I remember that story. We'll have a good trip.
$3 a piece.
Or 10 for 25. That's the question I take.
Yes, I did.
So you can take it and have it free.
We will.
Yes, yes.
Thanks, guys.
Very safe travels.
Yeah.
2007.
Here, give me that.
You give me the little piece. Yeah. And then.
So David, tell me,
Name and phone numbers.
what did they do about the clots?
I'm on blood thinner.
Okay, so they're gonna let them dissolve over time.
Yeah, that's the only thing they can do.
What are you on?
Eloquence,
Eloquence.
I think, or one of the newer ones.
Yeah, I'm on Xarelto. It's Eloquence.
Either
Very similar.
one of the two, I don't know. Either I'm on Eloquence or Xarelto.
Mine's a little triangle
No.
maroon pill.
No, mine must be Eloquence then. Because mine is a little round pill. You'd think it was an Advil if you didn't know it.
How did you know what was going on? Did you feel it?
Could I feel it?
Yeah,
Oh.
I'll talk to people and get them in their lungs. It's like, you know.
I knew something was wrong, but I didn't know what was wrong. You know, I thought it was complications of the bronchitis or the flu that I had, which, you know, this has been the sickest spring for me ever. And
He's had a tough spring.
And I went out last week, a week ago Friday, and bought a oxygen meter. Because I knew I was short of air. I mean, extreme air hunger.
On your finger?
Yeah.
Yeah, Bob knows too.
Had extreme air hunger, extreme fatigue.
Yeah.
You know, I put the meter on, it was low. Yeah, I went
How
up.
low?
I went upstairs one time, came back down. It was 85.
That's not good.
But I'd already scheduled the appointment, so.
See, that's the one thing I'm really happy about is all this time I've been in Navy, 95 rocks. The whole time.
Yeah.
There's no chest pain,
Yeah.
none.
Yeah.
And that's what has allowed me to endure all this.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Judy, she's.
I mean, I drank a cup of coffee with caffeine this morning and went right to 120. Bang.
120,
Beats per minute.
yeah.
Caffeine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Bang.
Yeah,
It's like,
AFib and caffeine, you
yeah, I'm
know?
not gonna do this.
Yeah. You want to go to 200, get a sports and energy, a Red
Yeah,
Bull.
get
or
a
something.
Bull, Red Bull. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they put me on Eliquis. I'll be on that for the rest of my life since they don't know where the blood
Once
clots
you have
come from.
clots, they don't want to mess with it.
Well, they don't know where they came from, you know, they said, well, the airplane didn't do it, you know, that wasn't a long enough flight, they did
Normally, that would be in your legs.
That's where they come from. They said most of the blood clots in your lung come from the legs. They
Yeah.
checked my legs and they were clear. So they said, oh, no.
No.
So we're gonna give you this medicine for the rest of your life. So.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Have a nice life.
Just don't cut yourself, ever.
Mr. Shad, it was good to see you.
Good to see you as well.
Yeah. So I've still been in AFib since January 1. And I've had 5 shots and an ablation procedure. And I gotta wait 5 more weeks before I can have another one.
Okay.
So keep praying. Yeah. But I'm walking every morning, about 1.25 miles.
Uh-huh.
And you know, I huff and puff, but I get around.
That's good.
And I'm losing some weight, which is always good.
That's always a benefit too.
Ooh, turn that off, will you?
Yeah.
It's the silver button on the right-hand side.